All right, it's loading right now. And you're live.
What is up, Max Nation? So happy to be here again on an amazing Friday. We made it another week. It's week 4 of this Max Challenge. Absolutely incredible. Just about halfway through this 10 weeks. And this week I have a guest that I'm truly honored to have speak with you folks today. Many of you guys know I went through my own life transformation, and I had a fitness coach, I had a nutrition coach, but I also had a coach that helped me look at life from a different perspective. And that coach came from a place called iPEC. It's a organization that certifies coaches through a unique and proprietary system that's absolutely amazing. It gave me a different perspective on life that helped me not only get in the best shape and create this business, but deal with every problem that I face in life from a different perspective. And today we have one of the leaders from that organization with us today, Luke Iorio. Did I get that last name right?
You got
Luke?
it. You got it.
Awesome.
And I know it pained your audience to listen to Oreo in the Max Challenge, but that's what it is.
Just so that you guys don't get confused, Oreos, the cookie, are not allowed on the Max Challenge plan, unless it is your cheat meal. So, Luke, thanks so much for being here today. It's truly an honor, and I was so excited when I saw that you were with iPEC, because man, that has been a big part of my growth as not just a business leader, but as a person.
Awesome, Bryan. I appreciate it. I love hearing that. Certainly, I'm happy to be here. It was fun because one of our other coaches, Kim, who's one of your franchise owners, had reached out to me and told me about what you guys were doing and chatted about this. And it was just great to hear her connection with you guys, how well the franchise has done. And as I mentioned to you and to Lindsay before we hopped on, I know a lot of people who have benefited a lot from the Max Challenge. So it's kind of fun to see how all of these roads end up crossing over.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. So, in these times, so many of our members, hey, myself included, we're all human, right? We go forward, we go back, try to stay on track to the best that we could. But man, these are trying times. And I know before we hopped on, when we were talking, even the social media, we're being triggered to pick up the phone and, scroll through the social media, consuming all this content. And I really do think it's creating a mind-body connection that releases endorphins, and we're not completely in control. Like, what advice would you have for people?
Well, I think you're bringing up something really important. As we were kind of chatting, what's going on right now with social media, with regular media, with all the different expectations and demands and information that's flying at us right now, including the devices of the weapons of mass distraction, as I like to refer to them as, they're pinging us, and they're pinging against our nervous system all day long. And so it's kind of keeping us triggered almost in that fight, flight, stress type of response. And as your members well know, you don't always make the best choices, particularly for our health, when we are being fed that way, because our nervous system is just looking for any way that it can calm down, it can distract itself from the discomfort that it might be experiencing at those times. And it's also that idea that it's not just what the food that we're feeding ourselves, but what's the information, what's the energy, what's that side that is feeding our nervous system, our minds, our hearts at any given time. So first is being aware of this exact conversation. So being aware of this kind of conditioned response that social media, these phones and devices trigger in us. And it's really starting to catch yourself create an interrupt at the very beginning of that cycle. Like, I'm amazed. I've deleted a whole bunch of different apps and off my phone. I've turned off notifications on pretty much everything except for like my text and my phone calls. And I was doing that because I was like Pavlov's dog, right? That thing would go off and I'd pick it up. Other times I'd just be, I'd have a 30 seconds of boredom and I'd be picking up my phone and I'm looking at my phone. I don't even know why I'm looking at it. And so then all of a sudden I caught that response that anytime I'm bored, anytime I'm stressed, anytime I'm looking for distraction, I recognized I was picking up this little device. And then that device was feeding me the energy, the information, that revving up my nervous system response so that I was getting that little dopamine hit, like, ooh, this feels good to go down this path. I needed to interrupt that. That's why I turned off notifications. I got rid of a whole lot of apps. And now I recognize, it's funny, I for a long time, I don't have it now. I used to have my, what do they call it? The wallpaper, as soon as you pull up your phone, or the lock screen,
Right.
the image actually was stop and breathe. And because as soon as I would see that, I'd go, wait a minute, why am I even picking up my phone right now? It didn't ring. I didn't get a text. I didn't get a notification.
Oof.
I don't need to do this right now.
Oof.
And I just put it back down again.
Yeah.
So it's creating those little type of interrupts. Obviously, you can use that for a lot of things, but specific to social media, or social media, these devices, that's one of the things I've done.
Well, I love it. I love it for a couple of reasons. One is the Max Challenge is about helping people to be happier and healthier. And it's not just what we eat, it's what we consume in terms of information, everything that's coming at us. And when you said that you put this screensaver on, it made me really think, because, man, in that second, that if I pick this up and it says stop, what'd you say? Stop
and breathe.
Stop and breathe. Man, that's going to make me think. Was I even conscientious that this was happening, or has this just been now ingrained in me and now it's a habit?
Yep.
Next thing you know, I'm on Amazon and I'm buying something, right? It's like
that, opening up your phone, it's no different than opening your pantry, opening your refrigerator, right? You're just go into a conditioned response. And even though you have these choices that you want to make, that you're trying to commit yourself to, it can be a struggle because we've been conditioned. And when we're stressed out, we lean more towards old conditioning than the new choices that we're trying to make. And so we need those little interrupts. You can put that little stop and breathe, or whatever phrase works for you. Pause, just literally pause, put it on your phone, put it as a piece of paper on your fridge or on your pantry for a while. And it's that kind of pause and think. Pause, be aware, and choose. Whatever those words, those phrases are, that are going to slow you down for a moment to get back into your conscious self, and then make the type of choice that you're really committed to, that you're going to thank yourself for later.
That's so incredible. I think it's so much more powerful than most of us, myself included, give credence to. But boy, I know if I open up my pantry right now, not because, I have my side of the pantry and then there's the other side of the pantry, but on the other side of the pantry, there's M&Ms in there, right? And I tell you, man, that package is bright yellow, the peanut one, right? And then it's got the pictures of the M&Ms. They're red, they're green, they're yellow, and they put it, so we're not 100% making choices for ourselves. These marketers, these big companies spend millions of dollars to package their foods with the right, not even just the right colors, but the right smells.
Absolutely.
When you open up a package, poof, that comes right at you. And they've designed that package to release that smell, to trigger endorphins and create a mind-body connection. If we could become conscientious of that and help people to break that cycle, I think that gives people the confidence to break other cycles in their life that are holding them back in business, relationships, and everything.
You're absolutely right. On the pragmatic side of what you're talking about, from the diet and nutrition side, for those of you that maybe haven't heard the term before, but processed food industry specifically engineers against something called the pleasure point in our brains. It is a point in which we can't distinguish the type of joy that we are experiencing, the type of pleasure that we're experiencing. So we could have a truly joyful awe moment, or you can trick the brain into experiencing pleasure based on controlling things like salt, sugar, and fat inside of our systems. They now do the same thing in terms of packaging, the total packaging and multi-sensory experience that you've got, the types of colors. All of those evoke certain brain patterns, and it's a manipulation of human psychology to create the types of pleasure responses to move us in that type of direction. So the more that, exactly, Bryan, as you're saying, the more that we become aware of those conditioned responses and those conditioned patterns within us, what we're becoming aware of is the illusion of choice that we have. So this is something that my partner introduced in one of our programs called the Law of Being. We've taught it for years around this idea of choice. Most of us, actually, the vast majority of us, don't make conscious choices. We make choices based off of ingrained patterns that exist within us. And in the case of like consumer packaging and consumer goods and processed foods, they're manipulating that conditioning so that we are kind of drawn to just pick those without really thinking about it. Well, that's true for, why do you get mad when you get a slightly, terse email that's sent your way. Somebody sends something that's a little bit of a cryptic text that you take the wrong way. Why do you respond that way? Well, those are all just conditioned responses. So we think we're then going to choose our response to that text, to that email, or that food. But that choice was made 10, 15, 20 years ago when it got programmed in you, when it got conditioned in you. So the more that we become aware of those responses in ourselves, those patterns we have, now we actually can move closer and closer and closer to the present moment and allow our conscious mind to choose and not allow our past experiences, past conditioning, biases, desires, wants, attachments, etc., to do the choosing for us. So it has a really incredible cascade effect when we learn how to break those patterns and be much more aware in the moment so that we can choose much more consciously where it is that we want to go.
That's awesome. I can relate to that on so many levels. Right now, people are nervous. People
Absolutely.
are, right? And so, people are coming with this nervous energy, and sometimes I'm really good at recognizing it, being
Mm-hmm.
self-aware, like, okay, this energy is coming at me. My blood pressure is starting to go up. My blood is starting to boil.
Yep.
Let me take a couple deep breaths, like you said before. Let me try to, be respectful of this person's point of view, and then try to, work through this in a way that kind of like lessens the situation, maybe takes it out of being such a catabolic, low energy type of thing to more, productive type of
Yep.
energy. That's sometimes, but
Yep.
sometimes I don't catch it in time, right? And I
Exactly.
find myself in this situation, and I'm like, oh my gosh, afterwards, did I really say that in front of 50 people
Yeah.
on a live stream with all the people that I'm working with? And I did, okay,
Yeah.
and I think that's important too, because I tend to beat myself up over that. Oh man, it's all over. I slipped up. I disrespected I didn't act appropriately. I wasn't my best self in this. But I've
Mm-hmm.
learned over time, especially with the coaching from a iPEC coach that I had, you're human, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, replay that tape, rewind, replay it in a more productive manner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the next time I'm hopefully better prepared to present myself in a way that I could be really proud of, that I would teach to my own kids.
Yeah.
That's the way I try to look at it. I would teach, if I want to teach my kids how to be their best selves in stressful situations, did I just do that? If not, well, I'm going to try to do a little bit better the next time, or a lot better the next time.
You just brought up so many things. Working in a kind of few different patterns. One is what you just exhibited is the power of reflection, right? So if we're getting pinged by these devices or pinged in the news or all this other stuff that's going on, we're not taking that time to pause and to settle into some silence, to some stillness, so we can reflect back on our circumstances and say, you know what are the things I did? Number one, which most people don't do. What are the things I did really well? It's okay to actually start there before we beat ourselves up. What is it that went really well? Like, where did I exude my strengths? Where is it that I was in the type of alignment that I want to have in my life, so that we can praise ourselves, we can build some confidence in that regard. Your super performers, like your elite athletes, when they get off the field, off the court, off the stage, the very first thing they do is immediately recall the best moment that they had. They don't go to where they can beat themselves up first, because they want to ingrain the success, the pattern they want to repeat first. Then it's in that reflection of, okay, now what would I like to make better? What would I like to improve upon? And that part of where we begin to beat ourselves up, it's interesting, because even the example you use of, oh, maybe I said something that was disrespectful or otherwise, it's kind of this beautiful and also slippery slope of guilt. So when we feel guilt, it's usually actually born from a really good place within us. We have a compassion or an empathy towards other people, and we feel like maybe we dishonored a value in either in them or in us. So it's born out of wanting to be in connection with others. But then our ego mind, our that inner self-talk takes over, and it turns it negative. It kind of like weaponizes it against us to beat us up over it. Somehow it, I don't know, it thinks it's keeping us in control in that type of regard, as opposed to us saying, you know what, I was doing the best I could at that moment. I was stressed. I was this, I was that. I'm not making an excuse. I'm just trying to understand that that's what I had at that moment. That was the best I could do at that moment. Now I can make a choice in terms of how do I want to go back and either make it amends if something needs to be mended, or how is it that I want to make sure that the next time I'm going through some of those struggles, frustrations, stresses, that I can respond differently, that I can catch myself a second or two to an hour or two to a day or two ahead of when I normally would. And so it's working backwards in that process. And in that regard, you can actually use guilt in a very healthy manner as a sign of something that you want to change, something you want to improve, as opposed to letting it be a slippery slope where you're just using it as a kind of a self-defeating type of emotion.
Ah, I like the way that you framed it up as a slippery slope because it could
Yeah,
become a downward
absolutely.
spiral. And I love how you said, reflect back on what you did right first.
Yeah.
These are all little things that, man, so powerful.
The other thing, I just want to hop back and please add to this as well, but you're talking about that energy that so many of us are feeling, whether it be the fear that's there, the uncertainty that's there right now. I think the most common emotion that I hear right now, and I'm sure those that are listening can say this for themselves. The most common emotion I hear right now is anxiety. People feel anxious. It's like the weight of that uncertainty is just kind of like bubbling around in our chest and our stomachs, our solar plexus, and it's just kind of going crazy right now because we don't feel certainty. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I mean, it's a new thing. Seems like every day right now. And so what's interesting is that human psyche, again, if we go all the way back to kind of our roots of who we are as animals, in that evolutionary type of sense, we have a tendency to move away from pain and discomfort. And that made a lot of sense when we needed to keep ourselves safe from saber-toothed tigers that were chasing us around the plains. Now, the saber-toothed tigers are the boss in the boardroom, the teenager in the living room. It's any number of people that we're perceiving as emotional, mental, spiritual threats to us at this time. The challenge is for us, and I think this is one of the greatest struggles, and this is true for whether you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to make major, substantial other life changes for yourself. Our ability to be resilient and to pause and to be okay with being uncomfortable is what we need perhaps more than ever right now, because that discomfort is moving us in one of two primary directions, either towards distraction. Let me turn a blind eye, be an ostrich and stick my head in the sand, or it's turning reactionary, which is coming to the point almost of explosiveness and a lot of anger and frustration that we see all over the place right now. At some places, well-deserved, but nonetheless, it's still anger and it can be very combustible in that regard. And so the more that we can be okay just being present with discomfort, being present with pain, not physical harm where, oh my gosh, my life is being threatened, but most of what we're reacting to, anxiety, is because of emotional stuff, mental stuff, spiritual stuff that we're going through right now. Our ability to be okay with that discomfort, to be with it, to understand, why am I this uncomfortable? It's because change is occurring. It's because patterns are being changed. It's because values are being realigned. It's because we're doing the hard work of change and transition. That transition is going to take a lot longer if we don't sit with the discomfort, whether that discomfort is opening up the refrigerator, putting on the shoes to go for the run that we don't want to go for, or it's something that's much more intensely emotional, psychological, or spiritual that we're going through. Our ability to build resilience in the face of discomfort, to make that choice, unlocks us and can liberate us in ways that we haven't seen before.
Do you feel that taking that, embracing that thought that you just gave all of us, right, could start with something simple like going to the
Absolutely.
you don't feel like taking the max class. A lot of people say, I don't want to do the class online, or
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it on. Honestly, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah.
I didn't sign up to run an online operation. I'm more
Yeah.
comfortable in a group of people. I love working out with people, high-fiving and everything that it's become. But those first couple of weeks, I was like, man, I want to do this. I don't want to go in the thing. My kids are in there, laughing, and and I got the TV thing. I moved stuff out of the way, and I was self-conscious, but I learned a little bit from it that moving forward, in spite of those feelings that I was having, that anxiousness, it was there, and instead of shrinking back, I moved forward. I think there's something bigger in
Yes.
that, because we're going to come out of this stronger.
What you're describing to me is, it's no different than when you walk into the gym for the first time, and you're gonna lift weights of some kind, whether you're putting 10 or 20 pounds above your shoulders, or let me, just for the sake of analogy, let me use the bench press. You don't walk into a gym and bench press 250 pounds. You walk in and you just get that first rep or two of whatever it is that you can do, and then it builds and it builds and it builds. It's exactly what you're talking about. Is what's the thing that's uncomfortable, but you feel like it's manageable, that it's a good, simple, smaller first step. I'll use the example of actually what built my steady meditation practice. Is that it used to be very overwhelming to think about, I'm going to meditate like twice a day for 20 to 25 minutes. How am I going to find that time? I set what's referred to as a micro habit, which is that I said, I'm not going to worry about meditating twice a day for 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes a day. That was it. 5 minutes a day. That 5 minutes I knew would lead to the 20 to 30, because the toughest part about meditation was the first 5 minutes. What do I do then? I make sure that in the mornings, my sneakers are visible to me. Why? Because if they're visible to me and I set the goal of just simply putting them on, I am much more likely to go for the walk, go for the run, or hop on my bike. So what's the little micro commitment that moves you in the direction? Because it's the starting that is so much more difficult than once you're in it. Once you've moved the furniture around so that you can do class on your video, you're 80% of the way home. I mean, so it's exactly in that regard, is that how do we build these little tiny habits that move us into the discomfort that we're feeling, but do so in a way that kind of coaxes us a little bit forward to embrace that resistance and to be with it and to move through it. And we're going to find that our energy starts to align. How many times has your brain, your ego said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then finally something in you, you call it your spirit, your energy, your soul, whatever, says, no, enough is enough. I'm doing this. And now all of a sudden your brain is like, I can't wait to do this. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. You got to tap into that level of personal power at some point, and doing these little micro habits are kind of a way of just realigning and putting that back front and center for yourself.
Reminds me kind of like a flywheel, or pushing
Yes.
a boulder up a mountain, right? Because if you let it, but if you could just, now it's going to roll down the other side, right? So if you take these little steps, eventually you're going to get momentum. The little steps are going to build on each other, I think.
The flywheel is one of the examples I love using. I think it was also Jim Collins had used that in Good to Great, right? Is how, a flywheel, right? And you think about this, a pedal and a bike. That very first pedal or two on the crank is what moves slow, but then it gets a little easier. It gets a little easier. And then all of a sudden that thing has momentum that you don't have to do as much to maintain this incredible progress and energy that's flowing. But we've got to be the ones to start cranking the flywheel. And that's what I mean about, stepping into that discomfort, apply it to the small things, and then it's going to have a very positive impact on your overall energy and the way you start looking at the bigger and bigger types of choices and transitions that you may want to make for yourself.
That's so awesome. This week, I took a little micro step. I didn't classify it that way, but I will now. A friend of mine kept posting. I mean, he had open heart surgery. Actually, had a heart transplant. It wasn't open heart surgery. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
But the short of it is that he's really gotten himself into the best shape of his life. And I'm looking at what he's done. He posts every now and then. He's not really, but every now and then to inspire other people on Facebook. And I looked at it and said, you know what, man? Like, here's somebody who I want to absorb a little bit of that energy. And right now, there's a lot of people around me, and their energy is not, understandably, they're very anxious, they're very nervous, whether they live in my house or they're maybe a franchise partner or whatever it might be. I'm getting a lot of and it's a lot of energy. So I said, let me make this guy, let me see if he wants to be an accountability partner with me.
Yeah.
And so we made a commitment. Every week on Monday, we're going to meet for a half an hour, and I'm going to talk to him about his business. He's going to talk to me about my fitness goals. We're going to keep each other on track and motivated. And I can tell you, after I get done with a conversation like that, I can already visualize, as I'm even talking about it, I'm getting more excited and more, so I just think it's so huge, because the energy that we're absorbing from around us, you could build this curtain, but it is, in today's times, there's probably more. Actually, in iPEC, I think I learned that it's a very low percentage of people that operate in a productive, high
The
energy
high
way.
conscious state. Yeah.
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 Is it,
Most people, and it's, 80+%, close to about 85%, that operate the majority of their time in that fight flight response. And so you even alluded to it. I really appreciate you dropping the word catabolic into the interview earlier in the process here. It's out of our book, Energy Leadership. But that when you look around the world today, is it really any surprise? Right? Look at the amount of just stress and fear and anxiety that's being peddled by media, by social media, and by our friends and family and community. Not because they're bad people, not because it's not has anything to do with that. It's just that we're stressed. We're stressed in the face of uncertainty, and so it's what's out there now. Just because that's prevailing at the moment, it doesn't mean that that's actually who we are. And that doesn't mean that that's kind of the normal state of who we're meant to be. We're meant to be much more aware and much more highly conscious. The key is exactly what we've been talking about, in different iterations, this whole interview is how is it that we create the pause so that we stop the stress response in our nervous system. So our neocortex, our higher executive functioning part of our brain that unlocks greater consciousness for us, can open back up again. There's tons of work that's out there on it. I've done actually a lot of interviews myself on some of this work, but that's so much of what we're talking about is so critically important because it unwinds that stress response. That at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I was smiling as you were talking because I was thinking all the way back when I first was going through the training with iPEC and some of the talks that I would have with my coach and some of the people that were part of that talk and learning how to deal with people who are catabolic in a way not. And anyways, now here we are, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years later, and some of those people are still in my life. And I have to tell you that those people right now have completely turned. They've embraced a different way. It wasn't because of me, but in their own way, their own journey, they
Mm-hmm.
came to this place and they are, coming from a completely different angle. And what better relationships we have now. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. It's easier to focus on the negative. I think the brain just automatically goes to the
It's
negative.
negativity bias.
Mm. Is it?
There's actually a negativity bias. It is that's a very a true thing from a neuroscience and psychological standpoint, and it's because it's a survival instinct. So our brains needed to watch out for literal negative response, meaning negative feedback from our environment, because that was the snake, the tiger, the warring tribe, or what have you. And so we forget the brain that we like to talk about today, the neocortex, the higher executive functioning side of who we are as human beings, it's in its infancy compared to our neurological programming. Our neurological programming is many, many, many tens of thousands of years older than our executive functioning brain. So our evolutionary responses tend to kick in more. So negativity bias is a very real thing because that's why we're still here. It helped us survive. The challenge is we need to get it under control in a very different way because we're in a different environment now.
Yeah, but maybe, just maybe, right? Maybe. And I do believe that as much as this is going on much longer than we could have expected. At the beginning, I said,
Yep.
hey, folks, we're going to come out of this better than we went in. Now people are starting to really, the stress is really turning up now because it's going
Absolutely.
on much longer. I still believe the opportunity for us to come out as a community, not just the Max Challenge community, but as a
Yes.
country and as a
Yeah.
world,
This world.
better than we went into it.
I couldn't be happier to hear you say that. It's kind of the mission at iPEC has always been around raising consciousness. We talk about it as raising the consciousness of the world one person at a time. But the way that we do that is through the community that we foster with our coaches, that our coaches foster with their clients and to each other, that we foster with a larger practitioner community beyond coaching. That's where all of a sudden we start to look around and recognize we've got a whole lot more shared humanity than we have divisiveness that's there. The divisiveness, yeah, it's being emphasized right now on the news. It makes for really good viewing and entertainment. But when we draw and we focus on this idea of community, that's, to me, that's always been the most amazing part about some of the really brutal tragedies and crises that we've been through as human people, is look at the human response that then is there. The people that run into the fire, the community that rallies around those that have been decimated by some natural disaster. And we're seeing community form in a lot of different ways right now in response to the health crisis that's going on, the social and racial crisis that is going on and is surfacing and being faced right now. We're seeing community, and the more that we embrace that and we move towards that feeling of unity and how is it we can stand together, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's one of the options, one of the choices that's being put right in front of us right now is, are we going to head more and more towards that act of community and unity? Are we going to look at our shared humanity in that regard, or are we going to allow it to tear us apart? And that's one of the things that's very real about what we're facing right now.
Those are some really deep but important thoughts, and hopefully more of us.
I don't know if this is what everybody tuned into for.
They definitely
Friday,
did.
the
And I
Max
can tell
Challenge,
you that, like the iPEC program, I was telling you in the beginning, we have certain elements of the iPEC program hanging on the walls in our offices. It's how deeply it has affected me. And my greatest hope would be that some of our members reach out to iPEC to learn more.
Appreciate
And
that.
your mission is to raise the consciousness of people, one person of humanity, one person at a time. So I think we did our job. If even just a couple people reach out, we did our job. So how could people find you guys?
You can reach out. It's IPEC, IPEC coaching.com. And specifically, if you actually go ipeccoaching.com/Max Challenge, we actually put a workshop of ours online, The Power of Choice. We greatly discounted it for Max members. So anybody that's tuning into your stuff, that you can go on and learn a lot more and dive into this conversation, actually get material from our program, but for a fraction of what the program is. And check out just the main website at ipeccoaching.com. We're all over social media. We have a podcast, which is One Idea Away. You can find us there too.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to encourage people one more time to reach out and to check out the website, because if we ever needed it, we need it now. We need this type of stuff now. Thank you so much for being here, Luke. I look forward to seeing you in person one day once this is all over. Thank
you, Bryan.
Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.